story of a day begins on December 14, 1969. Diane Maxwell was murdered after arriving at her workplace parking lot. She was sexually assaulted and robbed. Despite the killer's fingerprints and eyewitness testimony, Diane's murder was not solved until 34 years later, thanks to the hope of her father and the great efforts of her brother. Diane's killer was identified as professional criminal James Davis 3 decades after her murder. Diane Maxwell was born to David and Nora Maxwell on May 12, 1944 in Louisiana. Shortly after Diane's birth, her family moved to Houston, Texas. In 1965, Diane married and gave birth to her son. However, the marriage did not last long, and by 1969 Diane had divorced and was raising her son alone. On December 14, 1969, Diane left her home for her job as a telephone operator for Southwestern Bell. She arrived shortly before her shift began at 1 p.m. and parked her car. But she never entered the company building. At 1:30 p.m., a local homeless man named Willie Bell saw a young black man with an afro leaving a shack near the parking lot. Bell went to the shack hoping the man had left something valuable behind. When he opened the door to the shack, he found a woman tied up and lying inside. The woman begged Bell to untie her. Bell, however, had a troubled past with the police and feared he would be held accountable if he untied the woman. Instead, Bell ran to call the police. What Bell didn't know was that the woman had been stabbed and was bleeding. When police arrived, they found 25-year-old Diane Maxwell dead inside the shack. Diane had been forced into the shack by an unknown assailant and had been sexually assaulted, strangled, and stabbed brutally. The wound was small, but had hit a major artery, causing her to bleed. Inside the shack, police found a crumpled pink blanket and a man's gray suit coat. They also found Diane's bag, but all of her valuables were missing, including her car keys. Hours later, they found her Mustang a mile from the crime scene. Investigators seized the car and took fingerprints from it, finding latent fingerprints and palm prints on the steering wheel and door. Latent fingerprints are usually invisible to the naked eye, created by the skin on the fingers, palms, or soles of the feet. Police checked the fingerprints against Willie Bell's, and they did not match. Over the next few weeks, police compared the fingerprints of everyone arrested after Diane's murder, as well as potential suspects, but no matches were found. Investigators were unable to conduct a comprehensive search, as the matching process was done manually. Months turned into years without any leads on who killed Diane Maxwell. Meanwhile, Diane's brother, David Maxwell, pursued a career in law enforcement after her murder. At age 37, he joined the Texas Rangers. Around the same time, the Houston Police Department began using a computer system to match fingerprints against its database. In 1986, David asked the police department to examine fingerprints lifted from Diane's car, but no matches were found. David Maxwell then turned to Jim Ramsey for help. Ramsey's reputation and experience as a veteran homicide detective with the Houston Police Department made him an ideal investigator for Diane's case. Ramsey's first idea was to examine Diane's clothing to extract the killer's DNA. However, they were shocked to discover that Diane's clothing had been discarded, along with other crucial evidence. Ramsey's next step was to interview Willie Bell, the only witness to the crime, but Bell had died 10 years earlier. Ramsey tried to turn to crime scene photos, but discovered that the photos and copies had been sold to a magazine. Unfortunately, the magazine had not kept the photos or copies either. The biggest blow came when Ramsey and David discovered that even the fingerprints had been lost. Several months later, thanks to the efforts of David, Ramsey, and latent fingerprint examiner Debbie Benningfield, the fingerprints were recovered. They had been placed in the wrong file. By the time they were found, it was 2003, and technology had advanced to the point where it was easy to compare fingerprints against a wider database. It was sent to a Texas statewide database, but no matches were found. Ramsey then ran the fingerprints through the FBI's national database and found 20 possible matches. Technician Jill Kincaid visually examined each match until she found a perfect match: 58-year-old career criminal James Davis. His identification was further confirmed by Debbie Benningfield's fingerprint analysis. James Davis had spent most of his adult life in prison for various crimes, including carjacking, forgery, assault, and kidnapping a young girl. Ramsey drove to Davis's home, and when Davis learned that Ramsey was from the Houston Police Department, his demeanor changed. He refused to look at a photo of Diane or her car. Davis initially denied any involvement, but when he was told about the fingerprints, he confessed to her murder and robbery, but denied sexual assault. He told police that his motive was robbery. On January 15, 2004, Davis pleaded guilty to murder with malice aforethought and was sentenced to life in prison. After serving only 3 years, Davis died in prison on June 14, 2007, at the age of 62. Here we have reached the end of the story. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to watch the story of the killer who appeared on TV.